going through this list, I've mentioned a few of these things already, but as I mentioned, Propane Grill, something that you can cook outside on. Now, some people make the mistake, and don't laugh at them too much, because a lot of people just don't have the skill sets here. But you can't bring a propane grill into your house and try to keep your house warm. You'll poison yourself with carbon monoxide gas. So this is for outdoor use, right? So keep that in mind. There were people that were so cold during that last freeze that's what they were doing. They were burning fires, but not necessarily in the fireplace, but they were lighting things up to stay warm. So outdoors, having a propane-fired grill or burners, specifically burners as well, with extra stored propane, anywhere from 15 to 20 gallons, should get you through several weeks of use should you need it. A portable camping grill, a deep freezer, this number 3 here, so deep freeze. Again, these things will last. They'll stay cold. The meat or the frozen vegetables or whatever you put in them as emergency prepared foods will stay good for a good 7 days, meaning they won't start going bad until after that. It should stay cold if you keep it closed, even without the power. Especially if you're freezing heavier meats, they are like ice blocks. And so keep that in mind. This is something, again, it won't work if the power's out, but it will stay cool and give you a good 7 days of potential food storage. So keep that in mind. Beyond that, if you have a generator, you can go beyond that point. Let's say we're trying to prepare and can some things or understand what we can have in the long term. So I'm going to skip ahead over here to number 8, which is canned food items. So this is a big one because a lot of your canned food items will last on a shelf anywhere from 5 to 10 years if they're properly canned. So, you can go to the grocery store if you don't know how to can your own food. Like, this is something we could add to this list, which is canning, right? You can do your own canning. So you can buy, how most people do their canning is they cook the food in a pressure pot, so pressure cooker. So you'd need a pressure cooker, and you'd need mason jars to put and seal the food once you've cooked it. So proper, and you can, I would recommend, if you're thinking about doing this is a lot cheaper of a way to do it than to buy a bunch of canned goods, but just another option for you. But canned goods, what can you store that's gluten-free? I mean, what are the canned goods at the store? Remember, we're not just trying to have emergency food backup. We're trying to have healthy emergency food backup, because there's a big difference. Again, if the proverbial, hits the fan and you're stuck, you want healthy food, because healthy food equals healthy body equals healthy mind. And in tough times, we need that. We need that to stay sharp. So canned foods, canned goods, you're looking for organic canned goods. And so some of the things that I can share with you that my family has prepped is we have canned vegetables, particularly a lot of canned beans. Why? Let's talk about food in a different way. For the average person to not starve, and we're talking about 125 or 150 pound person, you need about 1,200 calories of food per day. You need 1,200 calories of food to not starve, okay? If you're 150 pounds and you start going under this on the regular, your body's going to start auto-cannibalizing itself. It's going to start breaking into your own tissue. You're going to start losing weight, and that's how you can go downhill. So again, if you're ever in an emergency, hopefully it's not that long where we have to worry about that, right? But again, what is this about? It's about being prepared. Prepare for the worst, right? So that you can go through it if it ever does happen. And if you over prepare, great. Now you just have some extra food in your pantry that you can eat through. But 1,200 calories. Now, if we're talking about a big guy, like a 200-pound guy, 1,200 calories won't cut it. But use this as a number. So if you've got 5 family members, right? So 5 times 1,200, and they're all about average size, then that's 6,000 calories a day that you need to make sure that you're preparing for. 6,000 calories a day is a lot of calories. And so, again, during a power outage or an emergency, you're not going to gorge. You're not going to overconsume. You're not going to eat 2,000 calories. You're going to keep it to a minimum. You're going to try to stretch it out and make it go further. But 6,000 calories a day for that family of 5, you got to stretch that out. And that's one of the reasons why I like canned beans. Now, many of you may be thinking, Dr. Osborne, you've said in the past that beans can be problematic for those with gluten sensitivity. My answer is still, yes, it can be. But if your gut is healthy and robust, you'll be able to digest beans just fine. This is emergency food. It doesn't have gluten. So beans have a good source of protein. They're a good source of protein. They're also a good source of carbohydrate. So you got the two good energies coming from beans, and they're higher in calories. So you get a good amount of calories. So if you're trying, again, calculate how many family members you have. The other thing you have to potentially think about is, what if you have family members that don't live with you, and then they flood to your house or have to come to your house, right? And you don't have enough for that. So like, this is just something else to think about. This is why it's important not just to calculate your calories per person, but this emergency preparedness needs to be something that you should communicate with your entire family. Like, there should be a contingency plan for your family where, you know, if something goes wrong, we're going to meet here. We're going to have this amount of food and these amounts of other products and things that we may need during a time of emergency stored there or prepared there. So again, part of this is you need to have a contingency plan where this can work. But again, if you're just storing at home, 1,200 calories a day is what you want to try to plan for. My advice is depending on how big your house is, depending on how much space you have between 2 and 4 weeks of food prepared. The longer you can store, probably the better. Should something really bad happen, you'd be more prepared. But 2 to 4 weeks should give you a really solid window of having nutrition before things can get really, really hungry, right? So canned beans, you can do, so in the vegetable aspect of things, you know, a lot of people say canned corn. No, don't do canned corn. You can can potatoes, you can can sweet potatoes, you can do canned green beans, you can do canned pinto beans, navy beans, whatever suits you. White beans, great northern beans. There are a lot of different varieties, a lot of different options in that bean family. You can do canned refried beans. Again, my advice to you is these are all available, and you can find these all on regular grocery store shelves in an organic fashion. So beans are something, again, a lot of protein, a lot of carbohydrate, a lot of calories that can get you through an emergency situation. Should you need that backup food that has a longer shelf life. Again, they're not going to go bad sitting on your shelf in a sealed can. One of the other things I like in cans is canned meat. So this could be a lot of your options here. Fish, so canned fish, canned tuna, canned salmon, sardines. These are fatty fish. They have high fat concentration, so you're not just protein and carb, but you're also getting the fat. You're getting that vital protein. Remember, one of the things that happens in an emergency is the fresh food goes first, and then a lot of what's left can be lower in protein unless you plan for it. And the worst situation you could be in is on a low protein diet when you need your body to perform and you need your brain to perform. Low protein will really wreck that. So canned fish, very good. You can also do canned meat. And some people, again, going back to pressure cooking and mason jars, you can can a lot of your own meat. You can can cubed beef, very easy to do. And you can, again, stock this on a shelf in a dry pantry somewhere in your home, or if you've got a closet that maybe is not used for a whole lot, you might consider that as storage space. But canning fish, canning meat, canning beans, canning vegetables, and then canning fruit. So fruit, it goes a long way. Remember, the thing about fruit is it's instant carbohydrate energy, but fruit also contains like your vitamin C and some of your other phytonutrients. Now, what I wouldn't encourage is you buy a bunch of canned fruit that's in corn syrup, because remember, that's junk, right? That sugar, that syrup, it's genetically modified corn. I mean, you're running the chance of wrecking your health over that. So you want organic. Organic canned fruit in natural juices. Natural fruit juices is the best way to buy. Those are available at most local grocery stores. So again, these are not like gourmet items that are ultra expensive. These are things that you can buy slowly over time, stock up on them. Again, looking for that 2 to 4 week storage at 1,200 calories per person as a minimum, and that you're looking for. Okay, so you've also got other things on this list. Frozen goods, number 9, frozen. This goes to your freezer, right? So you can stock that freezer my advice is just stock it up. You'll eat your way through it anyway, but if you have enough that takes you through the next month, if something happens, it'll be there as a backup for you because you're going to eat it anyway. So again, think about what you buy in terms of your regular meats and also frozen vegetables. But remember, if we're talking about emergency, vegetables are good, but they're super low calorie. So they're gonna make it harder to hit that 1200. They're not gonna have a ton of calories. So remember, when you're thinking about emergency, you want, first and foremost, you want plenty of calories. So, plan accordingly. But again, frozen meats are a great source of fat and protein over all calories. We also have dehydrated meats. So dehydrated foods, not just meats, you can dehydrate fruit as well. Those are good options because they have a really long shelf life. I like dried jerkies. I have a number of different jerkies that I store, turkey, chicken, and beef jerkies. They have a very long shelf life, and so again, if you really have to gravitate, if it's a matter of eating or not eating, you'll have something to eat with these dried fruits and jerkies. What some people do too is they buy a food dehydrator, and so you can dehydrate your own because dehydrated fruit and meat is super expensive. And so if you're working on a budget, know that if you buy a dehydrator, you can do your own dehydrating. You can dehydrate banana chips and strawberry chips. You can dehydrate berries. You can dehydrate apples. I mean, you can dehydrate any fruit and make your own kind of mix with that and seal it really, really well. You've got to seal it and store it really well, but you can dehydrate these things really easy. Food dehydrators are not that expensive. But again, if you're sitting down with your family trying to figure out how much you need, this is something to think about. The cost of buying them dehydrated versus the cost of dehydrating them yourself. But can be very, very effective. Another one, I'm going to skip here to number 14, are nuts. Nuts in the shell. Why do we say nuts in the shell? Because a lot of your nuts, when you go buy them, if they're shelled already, they're starting to oxidize. They can turn rancid. Nut can turn rancid pretty quickly once the shell's cracked off of them. So you want nuts in the shell. They'll have a really long shelf life. They can last for years when they stay in the shell if they're somewhere in a cool, dry place. So nuts, what do we got? We got things like pecans and walnuts. There's almonds, there's Brazil nuts and hazelnuts. So, I mean, there's just a lot of options with nuts that you can, again, buy them in the shell. We have a number of different places that we buy them from. We actually have some of our own nut trees as well. And so we bag those up annually and make sure we have plenty of them packed away. Nuts are super high in fat, super high in calories. So if you take everything into consideration here, you've got well-represented fat, well-represented protein, and well-represented carbohydrate from all this, which is what you're after. Remember, you can prepare for emergency doesn't mean you have to eat and starve and just barely get by. You can prepare, and if you have some foresight in this, you can prepare really, really well. One of the other things I really like, you can take nuts, dried fruit, and you can make some of your own, like a granola. It's not the store-bought granola that's full of gluten, but it's your own homemade kind of trail mix, if you will. Some companies actually make versions of grain-free granola as well that are pretty good, and they come in a sealed bag, and they have a pretty decent shelf life, so you might also consider those. Again, a little bit more expensive than drying your own and buying nuts in the shell, but something that you could also consider doing. Number 15 on this list, dried beans last a really, really long time. You can buy them by the 5 and 10 pound bags, even the 25 pound bags, and store a couple of those, or easy access food. You need something to cook them with, though. Remember that this goes back to if the power's out, you got to be able to cook beans. That's why I like canned beans too, because they're already pressure cooked. But dried beans, you got to have some way to heat them up and cook them down. Otherwise, you're going to be miserable trying to eat them. Legumes and seeds as well. Again, legumes and seeds, if you're celiac and you're new to the gluten-free diet, if you're gluten sensitive and you're new to the gluten-free diet, these are things you might not tolerate super well in the beginning. So if that's you, keep that in mind as you're making your plan. A lot of the people that come to see me don't do well for the first 6 to 12 months with any kind of bean or legume. And so they keep them out of their diet because their guts are so damaged from years of gluten-induced damage. They're not capable of digesting those harder to digest types of seeds. So like pumpkin seed and sunflower seed are examples, pepitas and another example. So chia and flax are examples of seeds as well that you could store. High fat, high protein, good sources of micronutrient value. Again, they keep really, really long for a long time if you store them properly. So that's why what makes them such a good option. So these are all good options for you to store. Again, you're looking at 1,200 calories a day at times however many family members that you have, and looking for kind of a bare minimum of a 2-week storage, but preferentially, if you've got the space and the dollars, prepare for longer than that. And right now in today's economy, if you buy things today, you'll be buying it cheaper, because in the next several months, we're already seeing inflation come to us. We're going to be seeing it come to us in a much bigger way over this next year. Most people predict. And so in that regard, what you buy today will be cheaper. So if you buy and prepare your emergency stash today, you'll actually be buying it in before inflation prices start sinking or start setting us up. One of the other things that I encourage, a lot of you think, Dr. Osborne, you're going off the deep end. No, not really. Again, preparation is key. And that, guns, knives, bow and arrow or crossbow, like hunting material, fishing pole, fishing hook, fishing line. Like, these are things, let's just take it to the worst place possible in your mind. Look, I don't wish that. I don't want that. I'm not the guy that sits in his basement, hoarding bow and arrows and guns. But take it to the worst possible place that you can imagine. And imagine you run out of food, and imagine you have no tools, and you have, no skill set. You have no self-protection, no home protection, right? Maybe you have food, but you don't have any way to protect the food. And imagine the millions of people coming out of the city when the food is all gone. Like, that, to me, in my mind, that's the place that I take it as a worst case scenario, when the folks from the city move out to the country and you are the person that has the food. They're going to want your food, and they'll do anything they can. They'll kill you, they'll maim you, they'll do anything they can to get their hands on that food, because food, when hunger and starvation set in, people do different things. They behave in different ways. And that's what you want to take your mind to prepare for it. God hope it doesn't happen to any of us ever, but prepare for it, because if you're prepared and it happens, you'll be prepared. If it never happens, okay, you've just got some investment in some hunting things. Maybe you can learn a new skill. Maybe you can learn a new hobby. Maybe you can learn how to hunt. Maybe you can learn how to forage, etc. Be out in nature and connect with Mother Nature. So number 4 and 5, the fishing rod, the fishing pole, the fishing line, the fishing hooks, the fishing lures. Although you can dig up your own worms, that's a really easy fishing lure. The hunting knife, the handy knife, the pair of scissors, the bow and arrow, the gun, the ammunition that goes in the gun, all important things that you should be thinking of as your contingency emergency plan. Last on this list I'm going to talk about is something that you'll see number 13 here. Gluten shield and biotic defense is what you see, but I really want to talk more in terms of not just those two things, but more in terms of what does your natural medicine emergency cabinet look like? Okay, so let's say somebody gets an injury and they need to be sutured up and there's no way to get them to the hospital. What are you going to do? You need an emergency preparedness kit from a medical perspective. So like a first aid kit is great. You want to have sutures, and you want to have the needle to run those sutures. And then you also want to have some things that are natural disinfectants, like alcohol. Just pure alcohol, hydrogen peroxide, liquid iodine are all great options in your medical cabinet. You want to have gauze, you want to have bandage in that as well. And preferentially, you want to have an antibiotic. Like, go to your doctor and ask them to prescribe an antibiotic for an emergency case situation. And think too, not just oral antibiotic, but think about topical antibiotic should you get a major cut or a scrape, something you want to apply. Now, there's natural things that you can use that have antibiotic properties, and iodine is one of my favorite. Iodine is a natural antibiotic. So is silver. Silver can be very, very effective as a natural wound cleaner should you get a cut or a scrape. So, these two are the supplemental gluten shield would be like mainly as an enzyme to protect you. Let's say that there's no other option and you have to eat something. Worst case scenario, it's not going to be 100%, but it might save you a lot more suffering. So something like Gluten Shield, and then Biotic Defense, and not Biotic Defense are probiotic, right? So probiotic, very, very important in my opinion. If you, let's just say that, this last deal where the power went out, there was a water boil emergency alert, meaning that it was being recommended that you boil the water coming out of your tap because they were worried about it being contaminated. And so probiotics can be very, very helpful should you get some type of bacterial infection from the water that you're drinking. A lot of times probiotics are very, very helpful in that situation, especially, and if you had to take an antibiotic, you'd want the probiotic to help restore and to help support the kind of the regovernance of your gut flora, so to speak. So, have your medical emergency kit ready and planned out as well for minor scrapes, not major surgery. None of you are probably going to do major surgery, but minor scrapes, minor cuts, natural antibiotics. In mine, I have vitamin C. Somebody gets a cold or a flu, I've got vitamin C, I've got zinc. And I've got multivitamins. Multivitamins are very important because let's just say the worst happens and here you are, at 1,200 calories a day, minimal amount of food. You want minimal amount of food, you want maximum amount of vitamins and minerals. Remember, one of the purposes of eating, aside from energy, is to get nutrients, the vitamins and the minerals. So having good multivitamin will expand your food supply by providing you with the nutrients that are necessary, right, if food gets slim or times get really, really hard or tough. So these are things that I would encourage you to put in your kind of medical emergency kit. Again, silver as a natural antibiotic is a great thing to use. Digestive enzyme, a natural probiotics, and vitamin C, multivitamin, zinc, very, very effective, very, very helpful. You might also consider something for pain like white willow as a natural alternative to aspirin. White willow, most of your aspirins have grain derivatives in them, but white willow is can be a very, very effective agent in blocking the cyclooxygenase pathway, which is the pathway that creates pain and inflammation. And so having those things on hand, in my opinion, you're going to want to have them versus not having them. So these are things you might already have in your natural medicine cabinet. Just do a review of what you do have and make sure that you collect what you need. Hey, don't forget to check out the rest of the series right here. Make sure you hit subscribe below. And as always, thanks for tuning in.